Is undergoing games and training here in South Korea, and groups of North Korean artists are promptly crossing the border to the south for a series of cultural events marking the Winter Olympics. Today, we sit down with an expert to evaluate the latest inter-Korean exchanges and their surrounding controversies. But first, let's connect with our Devin Whiting for a look at the top headlines at this hour. Devin?
Hi, Don. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence is on his way to Japan and then South Korea, where he'll lead the U.S. delegation for the opening ceremony of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. However, he brings with him a message that despite North Korea's peaceful participation in the Games, the U.S. will not back down on its pressure on the regime. Kwon Jang-ho has this report.
After a closed-door meeting with President Donald Trump, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence set off on a 5-day trip to Japan and South Korea. He'll arrive in Tokyo on Tuesday, where he'll meet with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe the following day, and they're expected to talk about North Korea and what more they can do to up the pressure on the regime. He'll then set off to Korea on Thursday, in time for Friday's opening ceremony of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. However, the White House has stressed his role in PyeongChang will not just be ceremonial. A White House official on Monday said the Vice President will take every chance to highlight the reality of what is happening in North Korea. Another White House aide said Pence will make sure that North Korea does not hijack the sporting event for its own propaganda purposes. This point will be further driven home as Pence will be accompanied at the opening ceremony by Fred Warmbier, the father of Otto Warmbier, the U.S. student who died last year shortly after being released from North Korean captivity. The Warmbier family were also special guests at Trump's State of the Union address last week, where the president attacked North Korea's human rights abuses. Pence will meet with President Moon Jae-in during his visit, but there will also be much anticipation on whether there will be any interaction with North Korean officials. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who spoke with the vice president before he left, said on Monday that they will see what happens. Meanwhile, for the closing ceremony, CNN are reporting that the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, will be leading the U.S. delegation at the request of her father and the U.S. Olympic Committee. She's also expected to attend some of the sporting Olympic events in which Team USA are involved. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the top nuclear envoys of South Korea and the United States met in Seoul on Monday to discuss North Korea's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics and other issues concerning the Korean peninsula. They said they were satisfied with how events were unfolding, but that more needed to be done. Here are the envoys on Monday.
Our joint efforts to make the PyeongChang Olympics an Olympic of peace are making good progress. With all this, I look forward to having in-depth discussion as to how to move from here beyond the PyeongChang.
On Friday, I met with Unification Ministry officials. So we had good talks, and I think everyone was happy at the level of cooperation, collaboration between U.S. and South Korea leading up to the Games.
Seoul's foreign ministry said the two pledged further cooperation with countries like Russia and China on dealing with North Korea and promised to continue working closely together to try and convince the rogue state to, quote, make the right choices. Later, Lee also held a phone conversation with his Japanese counterpart, Kenji Kanasugi, where they also reiterated that they'll continue efforts to bring North Korea back to meaningful dialogue. President Moon Jae-in gave a speech in Gangneung Monday night at the International Olympic Committee's annual General Assembly. It marked the start of a busy schedule for the president leading up to the opening ceremony of the 2018 PyeongChang Games this Friday. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun reports.
President Moon didn't shy away from expressing his excitement over South Korea hosting the quadrennial event, speaking at the 132nd session of the International Olympic Committee in Gangneung, the joint host city of the 2018 Winter Olympics.
이제 4일 후면 그리스 헤라 신전에서 피운 올림픽 불꽃이 남북한 인구 7,500만 명을 상징하는 7,500명 성화봉송 주자들의 손을 거쳐 성화대에 불을 밝힙니다. 올림픽 정신이 높이 타오르고 세계인의 겨울 축제가 시작됩니다.
It has been a tradition for the IOC to hold its annual General Assembly in the host country of that year's Olympic Games. President Moon started his speech by welcoming guests attending the General Assembly, some 1,000 in total. He said it's a dream come true for the nation to be able to host the Winter Games in PyeongChang at its third try, after losing bids for the 2010 and 2014 Winter Olympics. He introduced all the preparations South Korea has made as the host country, such as presenting the world's first ever ultra-fast 5G network service, as well as launching the Dream Project initiative that introduces winter sports to young people living in countries that don't have winter weather. President Moon's speech reached its climax when he thanked the IOC for not only letting North Korea participate at the last minute, but also forming a unified team.
불과 한두 달 전까지만 해도 여러 나라에서 올림픽 안전을 염려했습니다. 북한이 평창 올림픽에 참가하고 남북이 단일팀을 구성하는 평화올림픽도 많은 사람들에게 불가능한 상상처럼 여겨지곤 했습니다. 그러나 염려는 사라졌고 상상은 현실이 되었습니다.
He said a safe and peaceful Olympics was the brainchild of the IOC in South Korea, and the PyeongChang Games will show to the world that sports can transcend all political and ideological walls and boundaries, which is, according to President Moon, the greatest value of the Olympics. The South Korean leader further reiterated that the successful hosting of the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games will mark the start of establishing peace in Northeast Asia, as Japan and China are set to host the 2020 Summer Olympics and the 2022 Winter Olympics respectively. He vowed to work and cooperate with not only the IOC, but Japan, China, and all other countries in Asia. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The U.S. under President Trump is raising the pressure on Korea with more import restrictions. The Korea International Trade Association, or KITA, says that as of Monday, the U.S. had 40 import restrictions affecting Korea. 30 of those were anti-dumping measures, 8 were countervailing duties, and 2 were safeguards. Under President Obama 2 years ago, the U.S. had just 16 such measures, less than half as many. Korean steel and metal products are being affected the most by far, followed by electric products and electronics. KITA says it expects still more protectionist moves out of Washington this year. After the U.S., India had the second most import restrictions on Korean goods with 29, followed by China and Turkey with 14 each. I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
A North Korean group of artists has left North Korea this morning on board a ferry and has now entered South Korean waters. They'll be performing at highly anticipated cultural events during the PyeongChang Winter Games, one in the sub-host city of Gangneung and the other in Seoul. Here's our Kim Young-gil with the latest.
The North Korean art troupe comprising 140 orchestra musicians, dancers, and singers will arrive in South Korea Tuesday afternoon on board a ferry called the Mangyongbong. The ship will arrive in South Korea at Mukho Port in the city of Donghae on the east coast.
The North Koreans are coming to South Korea on board the ferry Mangyongbong 92. They will be using it not only as a means of transportation, but also accommodation during the concert period in Gangneung.
Using the ship as lodging for them is also a way for the North to keep the artists from having contact with South Koreans. Seoul has temporarily lifted its ban on all North Korean ships entering its waters to allow the ship to come. The Mangyongbong 92 itself is not one of the North Korean vessels blacklisted by the United Nations or the U.S. on suspicion of involvement in Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. The ferry is being escorted by a South Korean ship near the maritime border in the East Sea and will sail to Mukho Port under convoy. The North Korean artists will perform on Thursday in the city of Gangneung on the eve of the Winter Olympics. Gangneung is hosting Olympic events, including women's ice hockey, in which the two Koreas will compete as a joint team, a first in Olympic history. The troupe will perform again on Sunday at the National Theatre of Korea in Seoul. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And to talk more on this, we're joined by Dr. Woo Jung-yup, a research fellow at the Sejong Institute. Thank you, Dr. Woo, so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
So there's been a flurry of very rare inter-Korean exchanges for the Olympics since the start of this year. How do you assess the progress so far?
As you mentioned, that it is very rare, and it has been a long period of cold relations between two Koreas after the North Korea's series of provocations on Korean territory, and also the series of nuclear development and the missile test. But it is a good thing that North Korea has decided to participate in PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games. We can see in three aspects to assess the progress of the North's participation in Olympic Games. First, in the perspective of inter-Korean relations, it's a good thing that we actually now open the channels to talk with the North Korea. But the second aspect is the more problematic, that South Korean government has hoped that the PyeongChang Olympic Games can lead to the denuclearization talks with the North Korea. But so far, there is no indication from North that North Korea is interested in it. And third, there's a concern that North Korea's participation may cause a problem between Seoul and Washington. And I think that Seoul and Washington has managed so far very well in terms of alliance management. So there's no serious problems between two allies.
Now, the joint Korean women's ice hockey team is certain to grab global attention during the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. And North Korea is also participating in other areas as well, with even its cheerleading squad expected to arrive here in South Korea soon. How do you think all of this will play out? How do you think North Korea's Olympic participation will play out?
Traditionally, North Korea has not been really doing well in Winter Olympic Games. Actually, North Korea didn't participate in 2014 Russia Sochi Winter Olympic Games. But this time, North Korea's sudden decision to participation in Winter Olympic Games is actually good for South Korean government in terms of hosting the Olympic Games. As President Moon Jae-in mentioned at the IOC meeting today, that there was a concern from the international community that they cannot be sure for the safety of participating in Olympic Games because of the series of missile and nuclear tests by North Korea. So there was even a report from other countries that some countries are hesitant to send their athletes to the Olympic Games. But North Korea's participation actually removed that kind of risk of participating in Olympic Games by other countries. So it's a good thing that we have North Korean athletes and other delegations for the Olympic Games. But the problem now is that there is too much discussion on how this participation from North Korea can lead to other matters like diplomatic matters and the security matters. So I think it's better for now to focus more on sports side rather than politics side.
Okay, now North Korea's ceremonial head of state Kim Young-nam will also be visiting South Korea for the Olympics, and all eyes are already fixed on the personal letter that he's expected to bring with him, which is a letter reportedly verbally given by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. What can we expect from this letter?
First, we have to clarify that there was no official statement from North Korea that Kim Young-nam is going to bring the personal letter in any form from North Korea yet. So there was a speculation that Kim Young-nam may bring the personal letter or verbal letter by Kim Jong-un to the President Moon Jae-in, because President Moon Jae-in already expressed his intention to meet Kim Young-nam when he came to South Korea. So we don't know yet what kind of message will be contained in his verbal or personal letter to the President Moon Jae-in. But if the letter has any indication that North Korea has an intention, Kim Jong-un has any intention to meet President Moon Jae-in to have further discussions. So it may not be specific as we expected it to be, but any indication that North Korean leader has an intention to meet our president, I think it's going to be a huge message for South Korea.
So it is just a speculation for now. We will have to see how things unfold. Now, another team of North Korean artists, including singers and dancers who will be performing at the PyeongChang Winter Games, left the north this morning on board the ferry Gangneung and have now entered South Korean waters. But we hear that North Korea changed its mind regarding the way of crossing the border 3 times before it decided to take the ferry. Why the fickle?
So we don't know yet what the exact reason of their changing their minds 3 times. But at the working level exchanges, that they have proposed that they would use the land route through Panmunjom first, and then they changed it to Gyeongneung route in the second time. And then last night they said that they are going to use the sea line. Which might have some problems with the international sanctions, but international sanctions does not designate Mangyongbong itself as a sanction target. So we don't have problems with that. But the problem is that we put our own sanctions on North Korean ships after 2010, North Korea's sinking of Cheonan vessels. So we have that May 24 measures ban on any North Korean ships to coming into Korean sea territory. So now Korean government decide to lift those bans to allow Mangyongbong to come into South Korea. So maybe North Korean government wants to see how South Korean government would respond if they change the method of transportation to the Mangyongbong, because now they believe that South Korean government would not oppose even if North Korea changed their method of transportation, because they know that South Korean government wanted to continue the dialogue with the North Korea, and they want to, South Korean government wants to have North Korea's participation, because South Korean government believes that these interactions will lead to the further discussions. So I think North Korean government may test the water to see how far they can go.
So South Korea gave an exception to the Mangyongbong ferry.
Yes.
Now, the Olympic spirit is all good. It's very friendly, very peaceful, but we can't overlook the controversy surrounding it. And one of them is, like you've mentioned, whether any inter-Korean exchange violates global sanctions imposed on North Korean regime. Were there any violations so far?
So far as I know, there was no violation from the South Korean side. I heard that Minister of Foreign Affairs has been close consultation with the United States and also the United Nations to avoid any possibility of violating from South Korean side. So I think the United Nations and the United States has all been in good consultation mode with South Korea to prevent any possible friction of international sanctions.
On that note, do you think joint inter-Korean efforts to prepare for the Olympics will undermine the global sanctions imposed on North Korea in any way?
So the concerns raised from the international community is not about technical ones, because there is a way that the South Korean government technically avoid any friction with the international sanctions. But politically, what kind of message that this inter-Korea relations would give to the international community is more concern for the international community and the United States, because as South Korean government, as we saw today, that unilaterally lifting the ban of allowing North Korean ships to come into South Korean territory, that there can be further measures that South Korean government take to allow more North Korean participation in Olympic Games and beyond. So it is true that international community and the United States had some concerns about those frictions that can be made by North Korea's participation in Winter Olympic Games. So South Korean government is very carefully approaching the issues to manage the issues, not to violate any international sanctions at this time.
Now, much attention is also focused on when the South Korea-U.S. joint military drills that was delayed upon Seoul's request will begin. When do you think the drills will take place after the Olympics?
Last month, Minister Song of Korea and the Secretary Mattis of the United States has met in Hawaii and has agreed to resume the postponed joint military exercise right after the Olympic Games. But the specific date has not been decided yet, so we have to see when they are going to schedule the exact date of the joint military exercise. But two governments has agreed that right after the Olympic Games, they are going to have a military exercise. So we are going to have joint military exercise sometime in April.
Sometime in April. According to CNN this morning, U.S. President Donald Trump's daughter and White House advisor Ivanka Trump will be visiting South Korea for the Olympics, along with a presidential delegation to attend the Olympics closing ceremony. Implications to her visit?
First, President Trump himself has mentioned a couple times that his family members would visit PyeongChang Olympic Games. So for the opening ceremony, we are going to have Vice President Pence and the presidential delegations to the opening ceremony. And as President Trump promised that he's going to send his daughter and also the official White House staff, special aid to the president, the Ivanka Trump, to the closing ceremony. So there was a speculation that there was a chance or opportunity that North Korea and the United States meet at the PyeongChang. So it can have some possibility of opening of the relations between North Korea and the United States. So we don't know yet because it seems like the United States is not interested in meeting North Korean delegations so far. But we have to see how this is going to pan out.
Like you've mentioned, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence will also be visiting. What kind of message do you think Pence will send to North Korea this time?
As we have seen from the media report that he has been very critical of North Korea's participation in Olympic Games. So even he mentioned that his purpose of visit to Korea this time is to stop North Korea hijacking the Olympic Games. So he's going to, it is believed that he's going to send a message which is very hawkish and hardline to North Korea's nuclear pursuit. So even though his purpose of visit is to congratulate of South Korean government hosting the Winter Olympic Games, but besides that, he's going to mention many things about North Korea's problems and also North Korea's human rights issues this time.
So he'll be talking a lot more than figure skating and speed skating. Now, some 26 heads of state, along with high-ranking officials, will be visiting South Korea for the Olympics. What kind of outcome do you expect from President Moon Jae-in's Olympics diplomacy?
So as we discussed that there has been concerns from international community about the safety of Olympic Games held in South Korea because the tensions has risen by North Korea's missile and nuclear test, and there was tensions, military tensions in Korean Peninsula because of President Trump and Kim Jong-un's verbal exchange on the matters on Korean Peninsula. So I think it's great for our president to show international community that our government can manage the crisis issues on the Korean Peninsula. And it's also very good that after 1988 Olympic Games, this is the great opportunity for our government to show the world that Korean government, South Korea has developed much more in 30 years after the 1988 Olympic Games.
Now, President Moon Jae-in is expected to hold a series of multilateral talks with world leaders and high-ranking officials. What do you think, what kind of topic do you think will be at the center of attention?
First, Moon Jae-in government's agenda on international community has been diversifying our diplomatic portfolio because we have focused only on our neighboring countries and also US, Russia, China, and Japan, so-called 4 major countries around Korean Peninsula. But with this opportunity, Moon Jae-in government can more diversify our diplomatic portfolio to get more international support on South Korea's agenda in international community. And maybe with North Korea's participation this time, South Korean government can get more support from the international community how to change the North Korean behavior.
All right, that's all the time we have for you today. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our show, but stick around to get the latest domestic and global news updates from all of us here at Arirang. Thank you for watching.